Hello, my awesome students. This is Dr. Foltz. It's been quite some time since I've created a YouTube video, but my current crop of students, my classroom students, they've asked that I be a little bit more active on YouTube. So that's what I'm going to try to do. Maybe I'll create a new video about once every week or two, and we'll explore literature and reading and writing together. But today we're going to be taking a look at a poem by Ben Jonson, but not so much about the poem. Obviously, we'll be breaking it down, but we're more interested in learning sort of a broader lesson about structure and about author choices. So as always, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint and I'm going to share it with you. So you should be able to see it right now. So it's Ben Jonson's poem that we're looking at today is called On My First Sonne, and it's important to note the spelling that's taking place. Most versions of the poem, they're going to be more modern English, and we're going to look at the more modern English one, except for the title, and we'll come back to why that title is so important. So specifically, what we'll be looking at today is the summary. Make sure that you understand the poem broadly. We'll be looking at the very basic levels of structure. And then lastly, and this is really what the crux of today's lesson is about, we're going to be looking at one structural thing that Ben Jonson does that you can really apply to all literature that you read. So let's look at the summary first. All right. We'll read the poem, and then what I'll do, I'll break it down line by line for you. Farewell, thou child of my hand and joy. My sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. 7 years thou wert lent to me, and I thee pay, exacted by thy fate on the just day. Oh, could I lose all father now? For why will man lament the state he should envy? To have so soon scraped worlds and flesh's rage, and if no other misery, yet age. Rest and saw peace, and, as could say, here doth lie Ben Jonson, his best piece of poetry, for whose sake henceforth all his vows be such as what he loves may never like too much. It's a lovely, lovely poem. So let's go down one line and another. It's of course very, very sad if you understood the context of what was going on. So in 1603, Ben Jonson lost his firstborn son, his oldest son, who was also named Benjamin. And he was a young kid, about 7 years old, and he lost him to the plague that was taking place in Europe at the time. Now, the death rate, of course, unfortunately for the plague, was about 50%, a little higher than 50%, but was even worse for children. And so this was a tragedy that was taking place across the landscape, not just within the Jonson household. But nonetheless, of course, he took it very, very harsh, and he wrote this poem. So the first line says, farewell, thy child of my right hand. So obviously, he's talking about his son who's died. When we say the right hand, it's usually where the most important person sits. So being the eldest child, this is why he's saying the right hand. Enjoy. My sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. When he's saying that a sin, he didn't literally commit sin. He didn't do anything wrong. But what he's saying is that he's being punished because he loved his son so much. He had so much hope for the boy, had so much love for him, he had so much joy with him, and now he's being punished as if he's committed some sort of sin for that. 7 years thou wert lent to me, and I thee pay. So the son was 7 years old when he passed away. When it talks about lent to me, meaning he was there only temporarily, so it wasn't a permanent purchase, so to speak, because he was with him for only a short time. Says, and I thee pay, exacted by thy fate on the just day. So what is he paying? What's he talking about right now? Well, he's paying with all the pain that he has right now, with all the heartache he's feeling. It's exacted by thy fate, the fate meaning he's dead, and on just day, the day on which he's died. So this is what he's paying. Note the language of being lent and paying. So it's all monetary language that's taking place here. The next line, oh, could I lose all father now? Let's stop right there. What he's saying at this moment here is, I wish I wasn't a father. Not because he has bitterness towards his sons or anything, but rather he's feeling so much heartbreak that he wishes he was never a father, and he doesn't want to be a father anymore. For why will man lament the state he should envy? So the state that, quote unquote, man is lamenting, that he's sad for, is the fact it's death. That's the state we're talking about. So he's mourning the death of his son, but he's envious also of his son being dead. And what he means by this is that because death, when you're dead, you don't feel pain. You don't feel that heartbreak anymore. And so he's envious because if he were dead, meaning Ben Jonson were dead, then he wouldn't feel the pain that he's feeling right now for the death of his son. To have so soon scrape worlds and flesh's rage, and if no other misery yet age. So let's look at this couplet together here. So first of all, that word scraped, it's an abbreviation for escaped. A lot of times poets will abbreviate words to sort of cut out one of the syllables, one of the syllables in order to meet the meter that they're trying to create. And we'll talk about meter a little later on. So when it says to have so soon escaped worlds and flesh's rage, so in other words, because of death, and so soon as, of course, the son's died so soon because he was young, death, you escape all that pain. Once again, you escape all that suffering. The second line that says, however, if no other misery yet age. So even if you don't have any misery, any pain, any torment when you're alive, you're still going to age. So at the very least, death, you escape that. Rest in soft peace and ask, say, here doth lie Ben Jonson, his best piece of poetry. So he's talking to the son once again, and he's saying, if someone asks you what, this is what I want you to say, here is Ben Jonson's best piece of poetry. So he's saying that his son is the best thing that he's ever created, right? So since Ben Jonson's a poetry, he's made many, many beautiful pieces of work. But in essence, he's saying that those pieces of work pale in comparison to the beauty, the wonderfulness that his son once was. So it's a very sweet sentiment here. For those say, or for whose sake henceforth all his vows be such as what he loves may never like too much. So there's a final vow that needs to be made, which is don't love something too much. Because if you do, you're going to have that heartbreak. And so what Ben Jonson is saying here, in essence, is sort of to wield your way back, to wield your way away from that love to protect yourself, because eventually there'll be death or heartache or a loss or something that affects. So don't like it too much. All right, so that's your basic summary here, right? So let's move on here to the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is structure, all right? Basic low-level stuff. So what's some of the structural points? I think we're going to go over 3 structural points with the poem. That should give you enough of an idea of what's taking place. And then we'll get into the more advanced and I think pretty cool part of it. So first of all, it's an elegy. If you don't know what an elegy is, this is sort of the Google dictionary definition of it. I think it does its point. A poem of serious reflection, typically a lament for the dead. And so a lament, of course, the mourning for the dead. So, and this is what we see that's taking place. It also has what we call iambic pentameter. If you're not sure what iambic pentameter is, it's sort of the beat or the rhythm of each rhyme, or not rhyme, excuse me, of each line within poetry, within verse, all right? And specifically in this one here, there's 10 syllables per line. So every line has 10 syllables. And every 2 syllables, it's going to follow the pattern of unstress and then stress. So da-dum, 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 unstress, and then stress. So that's going to go in sets of 2. So 2, and then 2, and then 2, and then 2. And it's going to be repeated 5 times, meaning that pattern of unstressed stress is repeated 5 times. In poetry, we call that feet. So there's 5 feet within that line, or 10 syllables. So pentameter, right? Pentameter, we pronounce it, penta means 5. So when we look at this this phrase, iambic pentameter, it's a formula to let us know what the rhythm is. Iambic, unstressed stress. Penta means 5. Meter just means it's the meter. So iambic takes place, that repeated unstressed stress takes place 5 times for a total of 10 syllables. Last but not least, every 2 lines, there's what we call a heroic couplet, right? We know what a couplet is, or at least I hope we do. A couplet is when we have 2 lines, right? Continuous lines above and below one another, right? And then they rhyme with an end rhyme. And those 2 lines, of course, they express a thought, a complete thought. A heroic couplet is just a regular couplet, except for the lines are in iambic, or iambic pentameter specifically. That's what a heroic couplet is. All right, so we're done with that basic stuff there. Let's talk about this one really cool idea here that Ben Jonson does. And I want you to, when you're learning about this with me, I want you to project it out and think about this sort of concept when you're reading other literature and you're breaking down other literature. It's a pretty important point. So before we talk about the more advanced concept of this, we just got to remind you what a sonnet is, right? So sonnets, they are poems that have 14 lines. Obviously, it's more complex than that, but for our conversation here, all you need to know is that a sonnet has 14 lines, all right? That's important. This poem, of course, is not a sonnet. It's 12 lines. So it falls short by 2 lines. It doesn't do a lot of other things too, but it's not a sonnet. I know you might be thinking to yourself, why are you telling me it's not a sonnet? You already told me it's an elegy. I know. Trust me, we'll come back to this idea. So take that concept and hold it up in here. The next idea that I want you to think about is the title. The full title in Old English, and specifically the spelling of the word son, S-O-N-N-E. All right, so keep that in mind, please. So on my first son. Now, when we look at that word son, S-O-N-N-E, the way it's supposed to be spelled, if you look this up on the internet, if you look on my first son, chances are it's going to be spelled S-O-N, but that's incorrect. Should be spelled S-O-N-N-E. What does that word look like? What does it remind you of? Keep in mind, we just took a look at another word, a type of poem on the other slide. And of course, it looks like the word sonnet. All right. So hold that in your thoughts now. So on my first son, it kind of looks like sonnet. Let's move forward now. The word son, it's kind of cut off before it before it can become the word sonnet. And I think some of you already know where I'm going with this, especially with this concept that it's cut off, meaning it didn't get a chance to fully manifest or blossom into the word sonnet yet. Can you think about something else related to this poem that didn't get a chance to fully develop or blossom into something? Keep that thought in mind. So again, reflect on the poem again. On my first son, it's 12 lines. A sonnet is 14 lines. The poem, not just the word, the poem itself too, it's cut off. It doesn't have an opportunity to become a sonnet. It's cut off before it becomes a sonnet. And so instead of becoming a sonnet, we mourn within it, or we actually mourn for the poem because it again had a chance to become what it really is. What's our conclusion on this? Why am I making this point? Well, the word son is cut off before it can become the word sonnet. The poem could have also been sonnet, right? But it too was cut off too soon. What else was cut off? What is the whole poem about? The whole poem about is his son. And his son was cut off, meaning his life was cut off before he could develop into a fully fledged, like a man, into an adult and live his entire life. So what are we talking about here? What's his son also compared to? Do you remember? Here's the line. Ben Jonson is his best piece of poetry. And so really what we're seeing here with this, when we think the word son, S-O-N-N-E, it could have been sonnet, but it was cut off. The elegy itself, the actual physical poem itself, it could have been a sonnet, but it was cut off. It could have been 14 lines, but it was cut off as only 12 lines. His actual physical son could have eventually been an adult and lived his life, but death cut him off from being so. So similar to his son's life being cut off before he could realize his full potential, so too is the poem's cut off. The poem then is that physical representation of his son. His son is compared to a poem. The poem physically is cut off. The title is cut off. So those two things, those three things are all one. So in essence, not only does the poem mourn the death of his son, but it physically embodies the son's life being cut off. It reinforces this idea. And so what we see is structure at this particular moment here, reinforcing a concept, thematic idea of his son dying. All right. So what is it that I want you to take away from this idea here? When you think about structure and literary devices as a whole, don't just think about what appears in the text, right? Don't just think about what the author uses. Think about what the author doesn't use, what is missing. The fact that the poem falls short of being a sonnet, the fact that the son is compared to a poem, the fact that the word son falls short of being the word sonnet, meaning those missing elements, not what's there, but what is not there, That's what reinforces the main idea. That's what reinforces the thematic concept. That's what reinforces really the tone, the mood rather, that you're feeling from the poem. It reinforces the loss of his son. The physical poem is his son, and it's the loss, what it cannot ever be. It's been cut off. It can never fulfill its potential of being a sonnet, just like his son can never fulfill his potential of being a fully grown, realized adult. That, of course, is it, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to information I'm sharing with you. I hope that that was helpful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or drop something in the comments. I've never done this before, so I'm going to say this one now. In the corner, what side corner is? It's going to be this side here. Make sure you subscribe. All right. It's in the right-hand side if you're looking at the screen. All right. Have a great day.